Look at that wrecked bicycle again. People like you will spend your whole life only fit to sweep trash." Ryan said it like that, right in the middle of the street, in front of passers-by. A police officer, a man used to standing above others just because he had a gun and a badge. Alex lowered his head, tightened his grip on the broom handle. No one spoke up. No one intervened. And if the story ended there, it would be just another cheap humiliation life handed to someone with no power to answer back. But only seconds later, just one moment, a gunshot ripped through the market. Ryan collapsed in the street, blood soaking into his shoulder, his gun sliding from his hand. The crowd stepped back. No one moved forward. No one tried to save him. Except Alex, the man who had been humiliated, the single father who had been looked down on just hours earlier. He was the one who ran into the line of fire, dragged Ryan away from death, while his daughter was shaking behind a truck. If you were Alex, would you step out for someone who treated you like trash? And if your child were standing there, watching everything, would you choose what the system says is right, or what your conscience says is human? This is not a story about heroes. This is a story meant to make you uncomfortable. If you want to hear it through to the end, subscribe now. The morning began with the pale yellow glow of streetlights still lingering on the damp asphalt. The city had not fully woken up, only stirring with a few scattered sounds, the garbage truck dragging cold air behind it, the wind brushing past leafless trees. Alex was already there early. He bent forward, hand gripping the broom, each stroke steady and slow, as if by keeping this rhythm, the whole day would not slip out of his hands. His left shoulder throbbed dully, a familiar pain, deep in the joint, not flaring up, not strong enough to make him stop, but strong enough to remind him that this body had once carried things no one asked about anymore. Alex could not remember the last time someone asked him why his shoulder hurt. Maybe it had been a long time. Maybe never. He swept close to the curb, gathering trash into small piles. An old bicycle stood nearby, the handlebars tilted slightly to the left, the chain making a faint sound whenever the wind pushed it. That bike took Lily to school every morning, carried the two of them home every afternoon. Alex parked it close to the edge, as neatly as possible, like a habit practiced for a long time. This street lies right near the elementary school. Mornings were usually quiet, but Alex always paid attention. He knew what time parents started to appear, what time traffic picked up. He did not want to get caught in their gaze. He just needed to do his part, clean enough, neat enough, fast enough, then leave before the day truly began. Another sound cut into the familiar rhythm. The engine of a patrol car is lowering, not rushed, not sudden, but deliberate and unhurried. Alex recognized it immediately, even though he kept his head down. The wheels rolled a little farther, then stopped completely, right in front of the area he was sweeping. The window rolled down. Alex felt the gaze before he heard the voice. The look passed over the unfinished pile of trash, over the worn broom handle in his hand, then lingered longer on the old bicycle parked by the curb. "How long have you been doing this job?" A man's voice, not loud, not harsh, but carrying the weight of someone used to being heard and used to being answered. Alex replied with a short sentence, just loud enough. He did not look up. His eyes stayed on the road surface, on the line between clean and not yet clean. A soft chuckle came out, brief and clipped, like a reflex. "You've been doing it that long, and it still doesn't look like much." Alex kept his hand on the broom handle. He did not change his posture. There was nothing in that sentence for him to respond to. He simply pushed the pile of trash a little closer, straightened it. The person in the car glanced around the street, as if inspecting a space under his authority. The school was close by, the iron gate still closed, but the sign was already lit. "Mornings here have a lot of parents passing through," the voice continued, slower. "They don't like seeing messy scenes like this." Alex gave a very slight nod. He knew that. He had known it before standing here. There was a brief pause. Then the voice sounded again, this time closer, as the person in the car leaned toward the window. "I'm being honest," he said. "People like you doing sloppy work drag the whole area down with you. You can tell right away just by looking." The words, "people like you," were released lightly, but they landed exactly where they should. Alex tightened his grip on the broom handle. His knuckles turned white. His shoulder flared with a sharp pulse of pain, like a delayed reaction. He breathed in, then let it out, slowly. He said nothing. The old bicycle came back into the person's view once more. The tilted handlebars, the peeling paint on the frame, the gaze lingered there longer than necessary. Especially around school dismissal time, the man said, his voice lowered, as if sharing something private but loud enough for a few people farther away to hear. This area has children. If anything happens, I'm the first one coming back. Alex nodded again, this time even more clearly. He pulled the trash pile closer to the painted line, aligned it neatly, a small action, but enough to show that he had heard and understood. The window rolled back up. The patrol car moved off, as slow as when it arrived, then blended into the still, sparse traffic. The engine noise faded, leaving behind a space without voices. Alex stood still for a few seconds. The broom in his hand felt heavier than before, not because of the trash, but because of the feeling of having just been placed into a clear position, lower, and told to stay there. He bent down and continued sweeping. The broom's rhythm was no longer as even as before. In his head, each sentence repeated, not whole, but fragmented, like debris. People like you. This area has children. I'm the first one coming back. He thought of Lily, thought of the small backpack she usually wore, of the way she liked to lightly kick the bicycle wheel when sitting behind him. Alex knew why he was not allowed to react. One wrong sentence, one look raised at the wrong moment, was enough to turn this morning into something else. He had no room for mistakes. He gathered the trash, dumped it into the bin, checked the sidewalk again. Everything was neat, cleaner than necessary. Alex made another round, even though no one asked him to. Only when he was sure there was nothing left to be looked at did he wheel the bicycle back. He placed his hand on the handlebars, straightened it a bit, even though he knew it would tilt again after just a few blocks. An unconscious habit, as if trying a little harder, could make the outward image lose something that bothered other people. When he walked the bike away, the streetlights behind him had just shut off completely. Daylight spilled onto the street, making everything look so normal that no one would think anything had just happened. But Alex knew that from the moment the patrol car stopped, a boundary had been drawn. He did not cross it, but he could not pretend it did not exist. Alex pedaled slowly, avoiding the familiar potholes. The early morning wind blew through, colder than before. In his mind, a quiet thought began to form. Not yet a sentence, not yet named. Just the feeling that, from today on, every movement he made was being placed under some kind of gaze. And he was not sure he still had anywhere to step back, if one day that gaze decided to linger longer. Alex got home when the morning light had grown clearer. The door closed behind him, cutting off the street noise outside, but the feeling of being watched followed him all the way in. He leaned the broom neatly into a corner, took off his gloves, and then went straight into the bathroom. Water rushed strongly from the faucet. Alex put his hands under it, scrubbing carefully between each finger. The skin on his hands was darkened and rough, old and new, small cuts crossing over each other. He washed for a long time, long enough for the water to turn from cold to warm, long enough for the sink to echo with a steady sound that emptied his mind. In his head, the morning gaze kept appearing, gliding past, then stopping, like a fingerprint clinging to skin. He finished washing, dried his hands, and looked at the mirror. The bathroom mirror was small, reflecting half his face. Alex did not linger. He turned away, as if looking longer would only make clearer what he was trying to push aside. Dad's home already. Lily's voice came from the living room. She ran out, arms spread wide, her face smeared with patches of crayon color. Alex bent down just in time, and Lily threw herself into his arms. Her body was light, familiar, the smell of children's soap mixed with notebook paper. "What did you draw today?" Alex asked, his voice more natural than he felt. "I drew a cat with my teacher," Lily said quickly, looking up, eyes bright. She said, "I'm good at coloring." Alex smiled. The smile came out at the right moment, the right amount. He nodded, gently rubbed her hair. In his head, another part of him was busy replaying the morning's words, layered over Lily's lively voice. They went into the kitchen together. Alex took a glass of water, drank a long sip. Lily pulled out a chair, sat at the table, kept talking about class, about the kid sitting next to her, about a game the teacher let them play at the end of the lesson. Alex listened, occasionally replying with short sentences, just enough to keep the story flowing. He told Lily a small story, a trivial one about a stray cat that used to sleep under the stairwell of their old apartment building. He spoke slowly, shifted his tone a little, and added a few details for fun. Lily laughed, resting her chin in her hands as she listened. But when the story reached the part where the cat disappeared, Alex's gaze drifted to the space behind Lily, where there was nothing but a white wall. There, the phrase, "people like you," got stuck, sharp and hard, like a bone that would not go down. Alex paused for a beat, then continued, switching to another part. Lily did not notice the break. She just nodded, asked a few innocent questions. His left shoulder flared when Alex bent down to pick up the box of crayons Lily dropped. He took a light breath, switched hands to hold the box, and stood up as if nothing had happened. The movement was too familiar, as if his body had learned to adjust on its own without awareness. Lunch passed quickly, a simple meal, filling enough. As he ate, Alex planned the route for the afternoon. He pictured the streets, the intersections, automatically removing crowded stretches, places prone to friction. In his head, everything needed to be smooth. Today, he felt thinner than usual, easier to bump into even the smallest things. "Where are we going this afternoon, Da?" Lily asked, her mouth still chewing. Alex answered out of habit, saying they would go straight home. Lily looked up at him, thought for a moment, then said, her voice more certain, "You said you'd buy things for dinner." The sentence carried no blame, only a reminder of a promise. Alex stopped his chopsticks. He stayed still for a second, long enough to feel his heartbeat slow, then grow heavier. He looked at Lily, saw the waiting in her eyes, without doubt. "Yeah," he said, nodding. "I remember." After lunch, Alex cleaned up. Everything was arranged more neatly than necessary. He wiped the table carefully, washed the dishes slowly, as if stretching out the time inside the house would help him delay something outside. Before leaving, Alex wheeled the old bicycle to the door. He put his hand on the handlebars, straightened it. The familiar tilt was still there. He knew that after just a few blocks it would lean again, but his hand still made the motion, over and over. The morning gaze appeared again. Not the face, but the way the eyes had stopped on the bike, on the tilted handlebars, as if those things spoke for themselves. Alex exhaled slowly, set the bike upright. Lily put on her backpack, stood waiting beside him, lightly kicking the wheel as always. Alex placed a hand on her shoulder, pulled her a little closer. A very small movement, almost unconscious. The door opened. Light from outside poured in. The familiar street appeared ahead, quieter than in the morning. At the end of the street, a patrol car was parked, motionless. No siren, no lights. Just there, like an object out of place, yet in no hurry to leave. Alex saw it immediately. His heart slowed, then sank. He recognized the car, recognized the figure inside. Ryan sat behind the wheel, head lowered, hand holding a notebook. His eyes were not looking straight out, only glancing down at the page, as if writing something. Alex pulled Lily closer. Lily did not notice the car. She just asked if it was hot today. Alex answered briefly, his voice even, but in his chest, the feeling of being placed under a gaze returned, clearer, closer. He stepped out of the house, wheeling the bike, moving slowly. The patrol car stayed there. No movement, no call, just a presence enough to remind him that today had been marked in advance. Alex lowered his head, adjusted Lily's backpack strap. When he looked up, Ryan was still in the car, still looking down at the notebook, as if the two of them did not exist on the same stretch of street. Alex gripped the handlebars and began to pedal. The wheels rolled over the road, the chain rattling softly. He did not look back, but he knew the patrol car was still there, at least in his mind. The street stretched out ahead. Alex felt more clearly than ever that today he was not just taking Lily to school. He was trying to keep everything moving in the right direction, at the right pace, and he was not sure if a small deviation had happened where that gaze would stop. The man stood in front of the convenience store very early, even earlier than the moment he planned to step inside. His shoulders sagged, as if someone had hung this body up and forgotten to take it down. His back was slightly hunched, his head lowered, one hand stayed in his jacket pocket, trembling lightly, the tremor uneven. Not from the cold wind, but because something his body was used to receiving was missing inside. He stood still, staring at the clear glass door in front of him, where the light inside reflected his own hollowed face. The phone vibrated in his pocket. Once, then stopped. A few seconds later, it vibrated again. The screen lit up through the thin fabric, enough for him to know there were calls with no name. He pulled the phone out, looked at the screen, his finger hovering over the answer button, then shoved it back into his pocket as quickly as if burned. Hearing a familiar voice right now would make everything fall apart. He knew that. He needed to keep himself standing for a few more minutes. His wrist showed beneath the frayed sleeve, dotted with old needle marks, bluish-gray and overlapping. His eyes were bloodshot, his lids heavy, but his mind was taut like a drawn string. He muttered a sentence very softly, his lips barely moving. "Just take the money, then go. No one gets hurt." The sentence repeated in his head like a simple calculation, enough to let him believe everything was still under control. In his jacket pocket, the old gun pressed against his ribs. The metal was ice cold, heavier than he remembered. That cold jolted him awake for a beat, enough to realize that what he was carrying did not belong to daylight, did not belong to this street, and certainly did not belong to him. But he kept his hand in his pocket, kept the gun there, like a temporary promise to himself. He looked to both sides of the street. People passed by sparsely. A few stopped their cars to buy coffee, and a woman pushed a stroller past. No one looked at him for long. He felt both lighter and emptier. Being ignored at this moment felt more dangerous than being noticed. He took a deep breath, stepped forward, and pushed the store door. The small bell on the door rang, a clear and brief sound, almost out of place against the panic swelling in his chest. The fluorescent lights shone white, the smell of plastic, pastries, and brewed coffee mixed. The clerk behind the counter looked up, their eyes sliding over him with the routine of a normal morning. "Hello?" the person said, voice even. He nodded, took a few more steps. Each step felt heavy, as if dragging something along the floor. His hand stayed in his pocket, fingers touching the cold metal, tightening. Everything moved faster than he expected. Light reflected on the refrigerator glass. The ice machine hummed steadily in the corner. At the candy rack near the door, a child turned to look at him. Curious, clear eyes, lingering longer than necessary. That moment stabbed at him, not from pity, but from the feeling of being stared straight into the bottom of himself. He turned away, his teeth grinding lightly. He pulled the gun out. The motion was clumsy, rushed. The metal showed under the white lights, crude and out of place. The clerk behind the counter froze, eyes wide. Someone else in the store let out a short sound, then went silent. "Money," he said, his voice hoarse, not loud, fast. The words fell into the space, struck the glass, and bounced back at him. He felt his hand shake harder. A part of his mind screamed that everything was slipping out of his grasp, faster than he had calculated. The clerk bent down, hands shaking as they opened the drawer. The sound of metal clinking echoed clearly in the small store. He looked around, sweat beginning to run down his spine, icy cold. Another sound rose, not the doorbell, but someone breathing fast. He turned his head. The child from before stood near the counter, one hand gripping a bag of candy, eyes wide. He felt his throat dry out. "Turn around," he snapped, not knowing who he was talking to. "Don't look." The sentence startled him as it came out. He had never thought he would have to say that. A sudden noise from behind the counter made him jump. The drawer slammed shut. The clerk looked up, face pale, hands raised in reflex. In that moment, shame and fear surged together. He felt himself shrink under these lights, under the eyes watching him. The feeling of being cornered, forced to end it quickly, hard, decisively. He pulled the trigger. The dry crack rang out, sharp and short. The sound slammed into the walls, echoed back, tearing the air apart. The bullet was not aimed at anyone. It lodged into the shelf behind the counter, shattering plastic. For one beat, everything froze. Then the world snapped backward. Screams erupted from every side. Someone fell. Someone called their child's name. The child shrieked. The clerk behind the counter clutched their head, shaking. He stood rigid, ears ringing, heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. He had never meant to fire. The thought repeated in his head, hollow and meaningless. The shot had been fired, and it could not be taken back. Outside, the screams spilled out of the store like a wave. The glass door shook as people rushed through. Rapid footsteps pounded the sidewalk. A car braked hard, tires screeching. Alex was nearby. He turned his head just as the shot rang out. For a moment, he did not understand what had happened, only saw the crowd ahead start running toward him, their faces twisted with panic. Someone shouted something he could not hear clearly. Lily tugged his hand, asked something, her voice shaking. Alex pulled Lily close. His heart slammed, but his mind went strangely cold. He looked toward the convenience store. saw the door flung open, and saw people pouring out like water breaking free. Inside the store, the man still stood there, the gun in his hand heavier than ever. He heard sirens somewhere far away, or maybe only in his head. He turned toward the door, saw figures running, saw the world stepping away from him, one step at a time. He knew that from this moment on, there was no way back. And out on the street, Alex stood in the middle of the crowd, surging toward him, his hand gripping Lily's shoulder tightly, realizing one thing very clearly. In the afternoon he was trying to keep normal, was being pulled toward him at a speed he could not avoid. The gunshot rang out, just as Lily tugged Alex's hand to point at a small item displayed along the edge of the market. She had not finished her sentence when the sound ripped through the air, dry and sharp, making her whole body jolt as if someone had pulled an invisible string from behind. Alex felt that jolt travel straight through his arm, up his shoulder, into his chest, and stop at his heart. He did not need to understand what had just happened, to know what to do. His hand tightened around Lily's, pulling her forward immediately, so fast that their steps fell out of sync. Lily was light and trembling, her small wrist almost slipping from his grasp amid the press of adult arms. Someone bumped Alex's shoulder, an elbow jabbed into his back, and a shopping basket fell to the ground. No one apologized, no one stopped. The sounds of the market shattered into fragments, sandals scraping on cement, the screech of tires breaking hard at the mouth of the alley, metal clanging as a stall was knocked askew. Someone shouted their child's name, the voice breaking, high and urgent. Another person yelled that there was a gun. The scattered words washed past Alex's ears without sticking, like water poured over glass. He pulled Lily tight against him, using his shoulder and back to force a path through. She was breathing fast, short and broken breaths, her hand clutching his shirt. Alex lowered his head, eyes sweeping quickly ahead, searching for an exit, a gap wide enough for the two of them to slip through. For a moment, he saw the convenience store door flung open. Inside, someone had fallen near the counter, their body twisted, an arm bent at an unnatural angle. Alex saw it and immediately looked away. He knew that if he looked longer, the image would cling, and Lily was right beside him. "Look at Dad," Alex said quickly, his voice low but firm. "Stay close to me." Lily nodded. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, as if trying to memorize his every movement. She did not cry. That silence scared Alex more than the screams. He could feel her heartbeat through his arm, fast and uneven. The crowd kept pressing in. At times, Alex had to stop for a brief beat because the way ahead was blocked, then push again when a gap opened. He heard someone fall behind him, heard curses, and heard even a soft moan. The smell of sweat, food, and smoke mixed, thick and heavy. At the end of the street, a voice rang out, decisive and louder than the surrounding chaos. "Move back! Everyone move back!" The voice cut through the crowd like a familiar command. Alex looked up. Ryan appeared in the opening that had just formed, his dark uniform standing out amid the jumble of clothing. He held a radio in his hand, speaking as he gestured, his eyes scanning in every direction. There was certainty in the way Ryan stood, in the way he placed his feet, as if this chaos was something he had been trained to step into. Ryan said something into the radio, short and without explanation. He moved a few steps closer to the convenience store, leaving behind those still hesitating. Alex recognized that moment with painful clarity. The man from the morning who had looked down at him, who had placed him into a position where he had to stay silent and do things right, was now walking straight into a place where he could die. Part of Alex wanted to turn away, pull Lily farther out, turn everything happening into something outside her field of view. He searched for a turn, a small alley to the right, where the crowd was thinner. He pulled Lily with him. Their steps hurried. "Dad?" Lily said, her voice shaking but still trying to stay quiet. "What's happening?" Alex did not answer right away. He needed to steady his own breathing first. "Keep going," he said. "We're almost out." But the crowd suddenly compressed again. Ahead, someone stopped out of fear. Behind them, others pushed forward in panic. Alex was trapped between those forces, his back pressed into another body, his chest against the awning of a stall. Lily was shoved sideways, her hand slipping from his for an instant. Alex turned immediately, grabbed her wrist again. Lily panicked, her eyes filling, her mouth opening without sound. Alex pulled her into his chest, shielding her with his body. his shoulder taking the full force of a hard shove from behind. Pain shot from his left shoulder down his arm, sharp and bright, but he held on, did not let go. "Here," he said, almost a whisper. "Stay right with me. Iscan." A gap opened ahead as a few people ran in the opposite direction, faces pale. Alex could see Ryan more clearly now. He had moved close to the store entrance, gun in hand, stance lowered, eyes focused. Alex saw Ryan's lips move, maybe speaking, maybe giving orders, but the sound was swallowed by the screaming around them. Inside the store, the man with the gun turned his head. Alex saw that moment clearly, like a slowed film. The man's face was white, eyes wide, pupils blown open. His gaze slid past Ryan, then locked on. Everything else vanished. The crowd, the screams, even Alex and Lily were pushed to the edges in that instant. Alex felt Lily shrink against him. She followed his line of sight, despite his effort to shield her. "Dad," Lily whispered, her voice thin as thread. Alex pulled her sharply to the right, trying to break out of that line of sight. He thought that just a few more steps, just getting out of the market, would slow everything down. But as he turned, a metallic sound rang out from the store. A very small sound, but unmistakable to someone, stretched so tight that every sense was fully open. Alex turned his head on instinct. The man inside the store had raised the gun. The barrel pointed straight out, aimed at Ryan. The distance between them was shorter than Alex had thought. Ryan stood in the open, with no cover, one hand still holding the radio, his expression not yet changed. In a very brief beat, Alex understood something cold. Running would not be fast enough. The crowd had sealed the exits. Lily was in his arms, and in front of them, everything was collapsing toward a single point where the gun was being raised, slow but deliberate. Alex pulled Lily closer, as if he could press her into his chest to shield her from what was coming. He drew in a deep breath, his heart pounding painfully. In front of his eyes, the morning flashed by, the downward gaze, the words about children, the reminder about coming back first. The man inside the store tightened his grip. Ryan took half a step forward. The distance between the bullet and everything Alex was trying to hold suddenly became terrifyingly thin. The moment before the gun fired, the market felt as if someone had squeezed it tight. Ryan stood in the middle of the street, his shoulders slightly turned, his arm raised in a signal, his mouth just opening to shout one more time. The sound came out firm, familiar, like something he had repeated hundreds of times in different situations. "Move back." The command had barely left his lips when the man in the store snapped around. His eyes were pale, empty, no longer the face of a robber, but like an animal driven to the edge, every retreat sealed off behind him. He pulled the trigger on instinct. The blast tore through the air, dry and sharp, slamming straight into the chests of those standing nearby. The bullet left the barrel in an instant, cut through the brief gap between the two men, and buried itself in Ryan's shoulder. The impact sounded heavy, like something hard being driven forcefully into flesh. Ryan jolted. His body swayed for a beat, then his knees struck the asphalt. The hand holding the gun let go. The weapon slipped from his grip, rolled across the road a few short turns, and metal scraped against pavement in a chilling sound. Ryan sagged to the side, his other hand instinctively pressing against his shoulder, where blood was already seeping through the dark fabric. The market went silent for exactly one beat. A short beat, but long enough for people to hear their own breathing. Long enough to hear the groan Ryan forced down in his throat. Long enough to feel the space open around him, bare and cold. The man inside the store froze. He looked at the blood, at the body crumpled in the street, and his face changed color so fast it made him dizzy. A sensation like waking in the middle of a long, high crash overcame him, carrying the late realization that he had crossed a line he could never return from. His hands shook violently, his throat tightened, and his breathing turned fast and shallow. He stepped back once, then stopped. In his head, images piled up, slammed down onto tile, face pressed into the ground, handcuffs biting into wrists, harsh lights flooding his eyes. That fear surged up, drowning out everything else. He bent down, shaking hands, reloading. The movement was clumsy, rushed, metal clashing with metal in a harsh sound. He was not thinking of killing anyone else. He was thinking of not being taken alive. The fear cooled, hardened, turning into the familiar resolve of violent habits learned long before. He stepped out of the store. The glass door shuddered as it was shoved open. The light from inside spilled behind him, stretching his shadow across the street. Each footstep landed heavy, like a nail being driven in. The space around Ryan widened, as if the crowd automatically retreated, leaving him lying there alone. Ryan tried to turn, his back scraping the asphalt. Pain from his shoulder spread down his arm, burning and sharp. He inhaled, then exhaled with effort. His free hand reached for the radio on his belt, his fingers trembling so badly they slipped off the button. He tried to speak, his voice breaking into pieces. Need backup. The sound was partly swallowed by wind and voices, but he repeated it anyway, like a reflex. Alex yanked Lily to the right as the shot rang out, his whole body locked tight, reflexively gripping her wrist. Lily flinched, her breath catching, her hand clutching his shirt. Alex turned his head just in time to see Ryan fall, see the gun slide away, see the blood spreading faster than he expected. In Alex's mind, a sentence from the morning surfaced clearly, sharp and cold, especially around dismissal time. It flashed like a signal, like a warning, forgotten, and now returning to collect. He saw the space around Ryan, and saw no one step forward. The crowd stood still, eyes wide, feet rooted, each person held back by their own fear. "Dad," Lily called, her voice thin and shaking. She pressed herself against him, her face buried in his chest, as if trying to escape the sounds and images rushing in. Alex bent down, shielding her with his body, one hand resting on her head. "Look at Dad," he said, low and quick. "Stay here." He pulled her back a little farther, finding a spot less exposed, behind an abandoned vendor cart. His heart hammered, each beat echoing in his ears. He saw the man moving toward Ryan, saw the gun held low but steady, saw his steps grow more even, as if the decision had already been made. Someone in the crowd started crying. Another person whispered something indistinct. No one stepped out. The distance between the shooter and Ryan shrank, one step at a time, unhurried, without hesitation. Ryan lay on the road, trying to lift his head. Sweat mixed with blood ran down his temple. He saw the figure approaching, saw the barrel of the gun, saw the sky cut into pieces by awnings and power lines. For a moment, he thought of the morning, of the quiet street, of where he had stopped his car, of the words he had spoken. The thought passed quickly, dragged back to the present by pain. Alex felt Lily trembling harder. He knew she could hear what was about to happen, even if she did not fully understand it. He looked around, searching for an exit, for someone who might step in, for something that could break in between. The crowd had drifted farther back, forming a loose circle, just enough to keep themselves safe, just enough to abandon the person lying in the center. The man took one more step forward. The remaining distance was so short that Alex could clearly see the man's hand tightening around the grip of the gun. His eyes did not look at Ryan as a person, but as a task that needed to be finished. Alex pulled Lily closer, feeling her heartbeat through the thin fabric. In his mind, a thought began to take shape. Not yet a sentence, not yet clear, but heavy and unwilling to fade. He knew he was standing on the edge of a choice he had never wanted to face. The man raised the gun higher, adjusted his angle, and stopped right at the edge of the space where Ryan lay. The crowd held its breath. Alex saw Ryan's hand tremble as it clutched at the road, saw his throat move, as if swallowing another wave of pain. Alex pulled Lily to the right, pressing her against the side of a delivery truck parked at an angle along the market edge. The truck was tall, coated in thick dust, the smell of oil and metal rising sharply. He forced her down, one hand holding her shoulder, the other covering her head, the movement urgent but precise, as if his body had learned this sequence somewhere far in the past. "Here," he said, his voice hardening. "Don't come out. Don't look. Wide." Number 2. Lily dropped into a crouch, her back against the tire. Her breathing broke apart, short and rapid, as if she were relearning how to inhale enough air. Both hands clutched her backpack straps, fingers whitening from the grip. Her eyes stayed on Alex, the look mixing trust and fear, as if trying to read the answer on her father's face. Alex crouched lower, blocking most of her view. His heart hammered, each beat slamming into his chest, as if trying to break free. He lifted his gaze through the gap between the truck and the crowd that had drifted back, saw Ryan lying in the open space. The uniform was darkened with blood, spreading from the shoulder down the arm. Ryan tried to lift himself, reaching for the radio at his side, but his fingers shook too badly to find the button. He lay there, exposed in the street, like a marked target. The space around Ryan widened. People stepped back. Small steps, careful shifts, enough to secure safety for themselves. No one stepped forward. No one called his name. Only scattered heavy breathing, the scrape of shoes on concrete as someone changed position. The man with the gun moved closer. He walked slowly, his steps even. The gun angled toward the ground as if the decision had been made long ago. He no longer shouted. The silence around him grew heavy and dense, pressing down on the market. Each footstep landed clearly enough that Alex could count them. 1, 2, 3, the distance shrinking. Alex felt Lily trembling harder. She curled in on herself, head lowered, but her eyes stayed open, peering past her father's arm. He placed his palm on the back of her head, pressing lightly, just enough to remind her to stay still. He did not look down. He needed his eyes forward. In Alex's mind, the morning gaze flashed by, sharp and cold, the hierarchical look, the pause on the old bicycle, the words about children and being the first to return. Everything passed quickly, but with a clarity that made his jaw clench. He felt a surge of heat rise, then get crushed beneath another feeling, heavier. He looked at Lily. She sat, curled up, her backpack tilted, the strap rubbing against her neck. Her lips were pressed tight, holding in silence. In that moment, Alex understood something simple and bare. He feared what would happen in front of her more than anything else. The thought needed no explanation. It appeared as a truth that had always been there. Footsteps sounded again, closer. The man had stepped out of the store's shadow, into the light. The gun barrel lifted slightly, then dipped like a habitual check. He adjusted his stance, shoulders loosening, grip tightening. Ryan lay there, trying to turn, but his body betrayed him. He breathed in, breathed out with effort, eyes open, staring up at a sky cut apart by awnings and power lines. His hand scraped weakly at the road, leaving a faint mark in the dust. Alex stood behind the truck, feeling each second pass. He knew time was stretching, yet everything ahead was moving faster than he could follow. He looked around, searching for something to break in between. An object, a person, a misstep. The crowd had retreated farther, forming a loose arc, eyes fixed on the center, feet planted. "Dad," Lily whispered, her voice so thin it nearly dissolved into the distant noise. She did not call out. She only needed to know he was still there. Alex did not answer. He placed his hand on her shoulder, squeezed gently. That was the only answer he could give. The man took one more step. The remaining distance was now close enough to see every detail, the spreading blood, the shallow rise and fall of breath, the eyes still open, not yet changed. He raised the gun higher, the barrel leveling, no longer pointed at the ground. Alex felt a hollow opening in his chest. He stood still. Exactly 1 second. In that second, everything stopped. Noise receded, as if pushed behind thick glass. He felt the weight of his body, the dull ache in his left shoulder, his heartbeat thudding in his ears. His hand brushed against something cold near his foot. A metal trash can, rim rough, heavy, set close to the truck. His fingers tightened around the rim. Cold metal traveled through his skin, up his arm. His shoulder flared with pain as he bent, but that sensation was pushed aside by a decision that had already formed. He turned to look at Lily one last time in that second. She looked up, eyes wide, breath quick, but stayed exactly where he had placed her. That gaze locked onto him, like a tether pulling back every hesitant thought. Alex lifted the trash can. The weight dragged his shoulder down, pain bursting in a short spike. He stepped out from cover, foot driving hard into the pavement, his body lunging forward. Metal clanged sharply as the can left the ground. At that moment, the man turned his head. His eyes caught the movement. His body reacted faster than he thought. He twisted, shoulder rising, the gun barrel lifting, leveling toward the sudden motion entering the open space. Alex saw the barrel pointed straight at him, the distance so short he could make out every scratch on the metal. There was no time left to calculate, no space left to retreat. The trash can in his hands was already airborne, its arc not yet complete, and the shooter's finger began to tighten. The metal trash can left Alex's hands on a low, urgent arc. It spun once, briefly, then slammed straight into the glass shelf along the side of the convenience store. The sound rang out sharp and brutal, like a hammer striking the stretched air. The shelf shook hard, bottles clattered together, and shards dropped onto the floor. The shooter stalled for exactly half a beat. That half beat opened a fragile gap. Alex surged forward. His body moved ahead of thought. The first step slipped slightly on the dusty road. The second caught balance. He ducked low, his left shoulder flaring with pain, but was pushed aside by a stronger force dragging him forward. His hand grabbed Ryan's collar, yanked hard. Ryan let out a short sound, pain and surprise mixed, then let his body be pulled. The fabric was slick with blood, sliding in Alex's grip, but he held on, teeth clenched, pulling one more time. The gun fired again. The sound tore past Alex's ear, burning hot, as a strip of flame scraped across skin. The air around him shuddered. He felt a brief wash of heat skim his arm, enough to numb the skin for an instant. He did not stop. He dragged Ryan across the pavement, the car tire appearing ahead, like the only cover still close enough. He shoved Ryan down low, pressed him tight behind the wheel. Alex's breathing broke apart, his chest heaving. He crouched even lower, shielding most of Ryan's body with his shoulder and back. "Stay down," he said, sharp and short, a command meant for both of them. Ryan lay pinned to the ground, his back scraping the cold asphalt. His eyes were wide, his breathing heavy and uneven. His hand shook as it reached for the radio, his fingers slipping off the button once, then again. He drew a deep breath, forced his voice steady. "I need backup," he said, the sound breaking at the end, but still clear enough to carry. Ahead of them, the shooter stepped back once. His gaze skittered, focused, then slid off again. He was no longer aiming cleanly. He fired to keep distance, to push away whatever was rushing at him. The next bullet punched into the vehicle body, metal screaming. A flake of paint tore loose, dropping near Ryan's head. Alex lowered himself further. He shifted his shoulder, using his body to block the line of fire. Pain exploded in his left shoulder, running down his arm, but he held position. He heard the sound of reloading, short and hard, metal snapping together like a warning. Everything happened in a handful of chaotic seconds, but to Alex, time stretched into separate beats. Behind the truck, Lily heard the shots land very close. She folded in on herself, shoulders hunched, mouth opening, but the sound trapped in her throat. Her body locked up, frozen. Her hands clawed at her backpack straps, nails biting into the fabric, leaving deep creases. Her eyes stayed wide, fixed on the narrow gap between the truck and the ground, where dust jumped each time a bullet struck metal. Alex caught a very small sound behind him, like a breath forced back. He knew Lily was there, just a few meters behind him. That knowledge drove into his head and held him as low as possible. Ryan tried to tilt his head, peering past the edge of the tire. Light flared into his eyes. He saw the gunman retreat, then advance again, not in a straight line, searching for an angle. Ryan swallowed, his throat dry. He kept his hand on the radio, repeating the call, short and steady, clinging to it like a thin line. Alex edged a little to the left, adjusting his cover. His back scraped against the tire rim, fabric wearing thin. He inhaled deeply, then let it out slowly, forcing rhythm. Each time a shot rang out, his body dipped a fraction lower, as if he could flatten himself against the metal. The shooter fired again. This time, the bullet skimmed the vehicle's edge, fragments spraying out, slicing a thin line along Alex's arm. Heat flared, then settled into a dull burn. Alex clenched his jaw, his shoulder locking tight. He did not look down. He knew that if he did, he would lose a beat he could not spare. He heard voices shouting farther away, faint sirens beginning to thread into the chaos. The crowd had pulled back even more, leaving a wide open space, enough for every eye to fix on the center. No one moved in. Everyone stayed at the edges, held back by fear and distance. Ryan's breathing grew faster. Blood kept soaking through, his uniform heavy and wet. His arm began to numb. He flexed his fingers, checking if they still answered him. They moved slowly, as if through thick water. Alex leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Hold still," he said, slower this time, as much for himself as for Ryan. Ryan nodded faintly, his forehead touching the road. The shooter paused for a brief beat. He reloaded again. The sound cut through clearly, each metal click locking into place, steady and cold. He straightened, shoulders loosening, as a final decision had settled. His gaze stopped wandering. It narrowed, fixed on the two bodies pressed behind the tire. Alex sensed the shift before he fully saw it. A pressure gathered ahead, thickening the air. He bent lower still, covering Ryan's head completely, his back rounding, his left shoulder trembling from pain and strain. Behind him, Lily drew in a deep breath, then let it out, shaking. She lifted her hands to cover her ears, but the cracks still punched through, rattling inside her head. She curled tighter, forehead pressed into her backpack, tears spilling without sound. She heard her father's voice, the metal impacts, the world breaking apart very close to her. Alex heard footsteps nearby now, not rushed. Each step was placed slowly and sure, counted. The distance closed. He looked past the tire edge, saw the shadow stretch across the road. The gun barrel lifted, metal, catching the light. He shifted again, covering more fully. His cut arm burned, blood seeping into the fabric. He held position, eyes locked on the space ahead, waiting for a misstep, a break, anything that could buy time. Ryan swallowed hard. He brought the radio closer, spoke once more, his voice thin but clear. "Officer down. Market location." He stopped, breathed in, then out slowly, as if saying more would scatter his focus. The shooter raised the gun higher. He adjusted his grip, tightened it, one eye closing, the motion practiced. He stood close enough for Alex to see the grime on his sleeve, the finger resting on the trigger, the tendons standing out. Alex felt his heartbeat slow in a strange way. Everything narrowed to a single point. Lily is behind him, Ryan beneath his arm, the gun in front. He held his stance, back curved, head low, like a final shield. The sound of reloading faded. The air ahead stretched tight, waiting. Alex realized the distance between the shooter's decision and everything he was protecting had shrunk to nothing, with no room left for error. The sound of police sirens tore through the air like a blade cutting straight across the market. The noise echoed from one end of the street to the other, overlapping, drowning out what little screaming remained. In that moment, every breath went off rhythm. Alex felt the shift clearly, as if another force had forced its way into the tight space stretched in front of him. The shooter turned his head. He flinched, his body swaying for a beat. The focus in his eyes from just seconds before shattered immediately. He looked toward the sirens, then down at the gun in his hand, as if only now realizing what he was holding. He stepped back once, then turned and ran. His steps were uneven, no longer steady. The gun dropped lower by reflex, but his hand stayed clenched, fingers curled as if they had not yet released the habit. His footsteps slapped against the road, rushed and offbeat. He charged toward the far end of the market, crashing into an abandoned stall, tipping over several plastic crates. A shout burst out as someone failed to dodge in time. He ran like someone jolted awake from a nightmare, mind scrambled, limbs no longer obeying. A police car pulled up, braking hard. The door flew open. Another officer rushed out without hesitation. The distance was lost in a few steps. Before the man could turn, he was slammed to the ground. His body hit the road with a heavy, exposed thud. His face pressed into the asphalt, breath bursting out in ragged, panicked gasps. The gun was kicked away to the side. Metal cuffs snapped shut around his wrists, the locking sound cold enough to raise goosebumps. He curled inward by instinct, muttering broken sounds without forming words, as if clinging to something about to slip away. His shoulders shook, sweat and dust mixing, soaking into the road. Alex stayed crouched behind the wheel. It took a full beat before he allowed himself to breathe out more deeply. The air left his chest as if it had been trapped too long. His arm throbbed, burning along the cut. He looked down at Ryan. Ryan was still pressed to the ground, eyes open, chest rising and falling harder than before. "It's over," Alex said, his voice rough. He was not sure if he was speaking to Ryan or to himself. Ryan gave a very slight nod. His gaze passed over Alex, paused for a beat, then moved elsewhere. A few people came closer, some in uniform, some civilians nearby, keeping their distance. A stretcher was pushed in. They carefully turned Ryan, movements fast but unhurried, like something done many times before. Ryan hissed when his shoulder was lifted, his teeth clenched. As Ryan was placed on the stretcher, his eyes searched the crowd. His gaze slid past unfamiliar faces, stopping exactly where Alex stood. There was something in that look, that had not yet formed into words. Alex turned away. He did not want to stand there another second. He knew what he needed to do next. He stood up, pain in his arm sending a brief ringing through his head. He turned and ran back toward the truck. Each step dragged a new pulse of pain with it, but he did not slow down. In his mind, there was only one image left. "Lily," he called, his voice urgent, but kept low. She was still hiding behind the truck, exactly where he had placed her. Her eyes were wide, unblinking. Her body was curled in on itself, as if she had made herself smaller to disappear. When she saw Alex, Lily sprang up and ran to him. She clung to him tightly, arms wrapped around him, her face buried in his chest. Her whole body shook, but she did not cry out loud. Alex dropped to his knees with her weight, one arm tight around her back, the other resting on her head. The pain in his arm was pushed aside by another sensation, heavier, deeper. He breathed in, the familiar smell of her hair filling his nose, pulling him back into the present. "I'm here," he said, his voice low and even, like soothing a child to sleep. Lily held on tighter. Her shoulders trembled in short waves. She lifted her head and looked at him. Her eyes were red, glossy, but the tears had not yet fallen. That look was no longer the same as it had been in the morning. It carried something newly placed there, still unnamed. "Dad," Lily said very softly, "why did you run out there?" The question fell into the space between them. Alex opened his mouth. His throat went dry. In his mind, answers surfaced and vanished one after another. None of them made it all the way to his lips. He looked at her, at the eyes waiting, and realized he had no answer gentle enough to say, and none honest enough without frightening her more. He closed his mouth. His hand tightened slightly on Lily's back. She did not ask again. She simply pressed her face into his chest once more, as if accepting the silence. Around them, the market slowly shifted into another state. The sirens still echoed farther away, but less often. People began talking to one another, voices low and hurried, as if trying to piece together what had just broken. Someone handed water to a person in shock. Someone made a phone call. Debris was picked up and set aside, as if order could return through familiar motions. Alex stood, lifting Lily into his arms. She did not resist. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her head resting on his shoulder, near the injured arm hanging loose. He adjusted his stance, enduring the pain, just so she could lean more securely. He turned his back on the market. Each step felt heavier than when he had arrived. He heard an ambulance engine start, the door closing. He did not look back. He knew there were images that, once seen again, would cling for a long time. Lily lay still in his arms. Her breathing slowly eased, though it was not yet even. After a while she shifted, lifting a hand to cover her ear, as if the earlier sounds were still echoing in her head. Alex felt that clearly. He knew what had happened would not end here. He slowed, leaving the market behind, turning into a narrow side street. Behind them, voices and engines blended into a distant hum. Ahead, the road looked like any other day, quiet and normal to the point of feeling false. Alex lowered his head to look at Lily. Her eyes were closed, but her hand still gripped his shirt, unwilling to let go. He stopped for a beat, standing in the middle of that street, realizing one thing with sharp clarity. The violence had been contained, but its aftermath was resting entirely in his arms, breathing softly and trembling. And he knew that from this moment on, there would be questions that would return. At times he was not ready. On evenings that seemed ordinary, he walked on, carrying Lily, carrying the silence without answers, and letting the rest of the story close there, like a lock just snapped shut, waiting for the day it would have to be opened again. The days after the shooting passed strangely. There was no sense of collapse, and there was no moment that signaled everything had turned a page. Life continued, in small steps, familiar tasks, but somewhere, the rhythm was slightly off, enough for Alex to notice whenever he tried to pretend otherwise. Alex's arm was wrapped in bandages. The white layers hugged his shoulder and arm, tight and bulky. A dull pain sat deep inside, not sharp, not enough to give him reason to complain, but enough that every movement reminded him again. The doctor said the wound was not serious, said it in the even tone of someone who had said it too many times. Alex nodded, thanked him, and left. No one said how long the ache would last, and no one said when the body would stop remembering. He took a few days off work. Mornings became emptier than usual. No sound of a broom against the road. No schedule forcing him outside before the city fully woke. Alex still woke early out of habit, brewed coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and watched light spill through the window. Everything was quiet. to the point of discomfort. That quiet did not make him lighter. It only made more room for the images to return. Lily sat across from him, coloring. She held the crayon tighter than before, the strokes dark and thick, often crossing outside the lines. Alex noticed, but did not say anything. When he asked what she was drawing, Lily answered briefly, then bent back over the page, as if afraid a longer conversation would expose something. The first day Alex planned to take Lily past the market again, she stopped at the end of the street. Lily's feet stayed planted, her hand gripping her father's shirt. Her face went pale, her eyes fixed on the reopened stalls, the shade tarps fluttering lightly in the wind, the buyers and sellers laughing as if nothing had happened. "Let's go another way, Dad," Lily said, her voice small but certain. Alex did not ask. He nodded, turned the bike, and took the longer route. That road was quieter, more empty, but Lily walked more steadily, no longer tugging his hand every few steps. From that day on, they avoided the market. No one said why, but both of them understood. Even the sound of a car braking hard at the mouth of the alley made Lily flinch. She turned her head quickly, eyes wide, as if searching for a danger without shape. Alex placed his hand on her shoulder, holding it there a beat longer than necessary. Lily breathed out more slowly afterward, but her eyes stayed alert. At home, small sounds began to carry a different weight. A door slamming made Lily pause. A piece of metal dropping to the floor made her spin toward the sound. Alex noticed everything, memorized each reaction, but did not know what to call them. One afternoon, Lily was playing with her stuffed animals on the floor. She lined them up, then suddenly her lips moved. Bang! The sound was very small, almost just a breath. As soon as it left her mouth, Lily froze. She looked down at her hands, then at Alex, a flicker of fear passing through her eyes. She fell silent, went back to playing, as if she herself wanted to forget the sound had existed. Alex stood watching. He did not correct her. He did not tell her not to say that. He did not try to change the subject. He just stood there, clearly feeling something slip from his hands, slowly, quietly, without a sound. That evening, the two of them went to their usual place near home for dinner. The place was the same, tables packed close together, low yellow lights, the clatter of dishes forming a steady background. On the wall, the TV was already on the news. Footage of the shooting appeared, filmed from far away, the shooter's face blurred. The anchor spoke in a neutral voice, listing time, location, and the condition of the victim. Lily was holding her spoon when she stopped. She looked up at the screen, stared for a long moment, as if trying to match those images with something in her head. Then, she turned to Alex. "Is that man going to shoot again?" Lily asked. The question was asked lightly, like simple curiosity, without raised voice, without drama. But Alex felt his throat dry out. He reached for the remote and muted the TV. The images kept moving, but the sound vanished. The restaurant around them stayed noisy, but their table fell into its own pocket of silence. Alex looked at Lily. She looked back, waiting. In his mind, answers rose and dissolved, saying that it was over, saying the man had been arrested, saying she was safe now. Each sentence pulled another image with it, another fear, and he was not sure she was ready to carry more. He stayed silent too long. Lily did not press. She looked at him a little longer, then lowered her gaze and continued eating, as if already used to the idea that some questions would have to be carried alone. Alex sat there, his hand resting on the table, clearly feeling his heartbeat. He understood that some answers, if spoken, would frighten her more, but not answering did not make the fear disappear. That night, Lily slept fitfully. She turned often, sometimes breathing harder, then settling again. Alex sat by her bed longer than usual, watching her face in the dim night light. The familiar features were still there, but the feeling was different. A thin, invisible layer had settled between her and the world. In the days that followed, Alex tried to keep everything on rhythm. He cooked on time, walked Lily to and from school, and told stories before bed. He did more than before, not to make up for anything, but to keep something from slipping further. One afternoon, Lily asked why her dad's arm was still bandaged. Alex said he had hurt it a little. Lily nodded, reached out to touch the bandage lightly, then pulled her hand back, as if afraid of causing more pain. That gesture stayed with Alex for a long time. He came to understand it slowly and quietly. What he had not been able to protect that day was not lying on a stretcher, and it did not appear in the evening news. It sat across from him every day, feet not touching the floor, spoon in hand, asking small questions that sounded accidental. And each time, Alex knew he still did not have an answer safe enough to place in front of his child. The hospital corridor was longer and colder than Alex expected. Fluorescent lights spread evenly across the glossy tiled floor, reflecting the hurried footsteps of nurses, of patients' families, of people accustomed to waiting in silence. The smell of disinfectant overpowered everything else, crept into his throat, and clung to his clothes, making Alex feel as if each breath required adjustment. He walked slowly, his arms still bandaged, held close to his body. Lily walked beside him, hugging her backpack to her chest, the straps pulled tight over her small shoulders. She did not ask where they were going. She simply followed, eyes on the tiled floor, counting squares as a way to stay occupied. The room was at the end of the corridor. The door stood slightly open. Alex paused for a beat before pushing it in. In that moment, he realized he had nothing prepared. No words, no posture, no expectations. Only the simple truth that they were here because something had happened, and that thing could not be undone with a few well-chosen sentences. Ryan lay in the bed, his shoulder wrapped in bandages, his arm fixed at his side. His face was paler than the last time Alex had seen him. When he heard the door, Ryan turned his head. His eyes stopped on Alex, then hesitated, as if weighing how long to hold the gaze. For a brief instant, the familiar air of someone used to giving orders surfaced, then faded. "You," Ryan began, then stopped. Alex stood still, did not move closer. He gave a very slight nod, a gesture enough to acknowledge presence, nothing more. Lily stood behind him, shifting a little to the side, her eyes roaming the room, stopping at the window frame, then at the machine beside the bed. Ryan glanced out into the corridor. There, Lily sat down on a waiting chair, hugging her backpack, her legs swinging but not touching the floor. She stared at a spot on the opposite wall, as if already used to waiting while adults talk. Ryan's gaze lingered there for a beat longer, then returned to Alex. There was no car window now, no glass sliding up and down, no familiar power distance, just a man lying in a hospital bed, his shoulder wrapped in white, and another man standing by the door, his arm bandaged, his posture upright but closed. Ryan inhaled. The movement made his shoulder shift slightly, pulling a brief grimace across his face. His mouth opened, almost releasing a sentence out of habit, one that might have begun with checking conditions, with routine concern, but it did not come out. He stopped, exhaled more slowly. "I was wrong," Ryan said. His voice was low, uneven, as if testing the sentence in the space between them. There was no usual certainty, no tone of someone accustomed to being heard. The words stood there, bare, unprotected by rank or context. Alex looked straight ahead. He did not nod, did not shake his head. His gaze held steady, neither avoiding nor advancing. A short silence fell between them, long enough for Ryan to face his own words. "That day I didn't step out because of you," Alex said. His voice was slow and clear, not loud, not sharp. The sentence was set down like a weight, without explanation. Alex did not look at Ryan longer than necessary. He did not want the words mistaken for an accusation or forgiveness. They were simply the truth. Ryan stayed silent. For the first time, he had no sentence to pull himself back to the center of the exchange. His mouth closed, his eyes wavered slightly, then settled. His unbandaged hand tightened on the bed rail, fingers curling by reflex. Ryan said, then stopped. He swallowed, his throat moving. "I understand." Alex did not respond. He was not sure what that word meant here. He looked past Ryan, out into the corridor, where Lily sat. She lifted her head at that moment, her eyes meeting his. There was no question in them, just a familiar search. Alex nodded to her, very lightly. The visit lasted a few more minutes, but nothing important was added. Ryan asked about Alex's injury, his voice careful, as if walking on fragile ground. Alex answered briefly, politely. No one mentioned the earlier morning. No one tried to find common ground to end on an easier note. When Alex turned to leave, Ryan called after him. "Thank you," Ryan said. The word came out slowly, heavy, as if weighed for a long time. Alex stopped, but did not turn around. He stood still for a beat, then said, his voice even, "You should rest." I nodded. The sentence carried neither forgiveness nor blame. It sounded like a necessary ending, so nothing more had to be said. Alex stepped back into the corridor. Lily stood as soon as she saw him. She slipped her backpack onto her shoulders and walked over. Alex placed his hand on her shoulder and guided her toward the elevator. The corridor was still long and cold. Just as when they arrived, other people passed, speaking softly, carrying their own stories. In the elevator, Lily stood closer to him than usual. She did not ask what they had said. She only watched the numbers light up and fade. Alex looked at their faint reflection on the elevator doors, saw the two of them standing side by side, silent. When the elevator opened on the ground floor, Lily looked up at him. Her eyes were clear and direct, without expectation. Alex understood that clearly. For Lily, this visit changed nothing. What she carried from that day remained intact, not lightened by apologies or admissions. They stepped out of the hospital. The light outside was different from the corridor lights, harsher, more real. Alex led Lily slowly, as if needing extra time to move from one space into another. Lily gripped her backpack and followed. When they reached the parking lot, she stopped, looked around, then asked very softly, "Does it still hurt, Dad?" Alex looked at her. The question was simple, but it hit the right place. He nodded. A little. Lily nodded back, as if recording that information, then did not ask more. She walked on, leaving the question behind. Alex opened the car door and let Lily get in first. When he sat in the driver's seat, his hand on the steering wheel, he felt clearly what lay ahead. Not this visit, and not the words spoken. But the questions have not yet been asked. The answers have not yet been said, lining up somewhere in the near future. He started the engine. The car rolled out of the lot. The hospital receded behind them, but the cold corridor and the smell of disinfectant stayed with him for a long time. The morning Alex returned to work. The streetlights were still pale yellow on the asphalt, exactly like mornings before. The city was not fully awake yet, but it had begun to move through familiar sounds of traffic, of shop owners opening doors, of trash being pulled out on schedule. Alex stood at the head of the street, broom in hand, clearly feeling the pain still lodged in his shoulder and arm. The wound had dried, the bandage was thinner, but each time he lifted his arm, his body reminded him that some days do not pass cleanly. He began to sweep. The rhythm of the broom against the ground sounded familiar, steady, but in his ears it carried extra weight. Each motion dragged along an image, a fragment of memory, a gap that had once opened on this very street. Alex swept more slowly than before, not from fatigue, but because each step had to be placed carefully, as if a slight misalignment would make everything slip away. Lily stood at the corner of the street, wearing her backpack, waiting for her father. She stayed closer to him than on earlier days, but her hand no longer clung as tightly. At times, Lily walked a step ahead, then slowed, as if testing how far she could go while still feeling safe. Alex noticed immediately, but he did not pull her back. He let her adjust on her own, even as his chest tightened with every step she took. More pedestrians began to appear. They passed Alex, past Lily, carrying their own rhythms. Some glanced over, some did not look at all. No one stopped, no one asked. Everything looked fine to an unsettling degree, as if this street had never been torn open by gunfire and screams. Alex bent down, gathering trash close to the curb. His grip tightened each time the broom struck something hard, a piece of metal, something that made him flinch for an instant before steadying himself. He knew he was reacting to very small things, and he also knew those reactions had nowhere else to go yet. A woman pushed a stroller past, talking on her phone. A man jogging went by, earbuds in, stride even. A shop opened, the metal shutter lifting with a dry, brief sound. The city functioned exactly as it always had, without waiting for anyone to catch up. Alex swept toward the section near the school. The gate was still closed, but the sign was already lit. He looked at the space in front of it, where that morning he had once stood, had once lowered his head, had once listened to words laid down like commands. The feeling was no longer sharp, but it was still there, deep, unnamed. A patrol car appeared at the end of the street. The familiar engine sound made Alex look up by reflex. The car slowed, exactly one beat, just like before. In that moment, Alex's body tensed, his shoulder flared with pain, and his breathing shortened. Lily stopped too, eyes following the car. The car moved closer. Through the windshield, Alex saw the person behind the wheel. Not Ryan, just another officer, a stranger's face. eyes forward. As the car passed where Alex stood, the officer glanced briefly, enough to register his presence, then kept driving. The car passed without stopping, without speaking. The engine noise faded, blending back into the street. The moment slipped by with a cruelty in its lightness, as if everything Alex had lived through were only a small scratch on the surface of the day. Alex stood still for one beat. Lily looked at him, questioning, but said nothing. Alex gave a very slight nod, as if to say things were still fine. He bent down and kept sweeping. The broom handle rubbed against his hand. The pain stretched briefly, then eased. Alex straightened the pile of trash, pulled it close to the painted line. He made another pass, though he knew it was not yet needed. No one asked. He simply wanted to be sure everything was neat, in place, leaving no reason for any gaze to linger longer than necessary. Lily walked slowly beside him, eyes on the ground. She nudged a small stone with her shoe, then kept going. Sometimes she looked up, glanced around, then lowered her gaze again, as if learning how to watch the world without letting it come too close. A man walked past carrying a breakfast bag, the faint smell of coffee trailing behind him. A bus stopped at the end of the street, doors opening, people getting on and off efficiently. A bicycle bell rang from behind, then faded. Everything kept flowing, steady and cold. Alex slowed as he reached the spot where his old bicycle was parked by the curb. The handlebars were still slightly crooked, even though he had adjusted them earlier. He placed his hand on it, straightened it, knowing it would tilt again after just a short ride. The motion came naturally, like a small ritual repeated over and over. He thought of the hospital visit, thought of the white room, of the sentence laid between two people, of the silence afterward. Nothing from that meeting followed him outside, except a clear sense that some endings leave no visible mark for others to see. Alex looked around the street. There were no commendations, no public thanks, no recognizing looks. The city learned nothing from what had happened. It simply continued, as it always did. He bent down and kept sweeping, the rhythm steadier now. In his mind, a slow but certain understanding took shape. What he had done that day did not create a new order. It did not correct the downward gaze, nor did not change how this place operated. The only thing that had changed was how he looked at everything ahead. Lily stopped and turned to him. "Are you done yet, Dad?" she asked lightly. "Almost," Alex replied. She nodded and waited. The wind passed through, stirring a few scraps of paper not yet gathered. Alex stepped forward, pulled them in, and dumped them into the bin. When he straightened, the streetlights farther down had just switched off completely, giving way to full daylight. Alex held the broom and looked at the street one more time. There were no promises for what came next, no sign that things would be easier. He knew he would return here tomorrow morning, and the mornings after that, with the same broom, the same street, the same passing glances. He lowered the broom, set it on the ground, and drew a long line across the sidewalk. And somewhere in that familiar motion, Alex felt with clarity that this story was not finished, even if the city had already moved on. The sun had climbed a little higher than when Alex began his morning shift. Light spilled onto the street in its familiar way, enough to slowly evaporate the damp streaks left behind by the garbage truck. The sound of the truck dragged through the morning air, repeating a rhythm Alex had heard for years. Everything unfolded in proper order, as if the city had memorized this routine long ago. Alex stood on the sidewalk, broom in hand, his grip already accustomed to its weight. The arm that had once been injured still tightened slightly whenever he lifted it, but his body had learned to adjust without letting that show. He swept in a steady rhythm, neither faster nor slower. The rhythm no longer felt like effort. It felt like a quiet acceptance, as if he had placed himself in the right position without needing to ask further. Lily waited at the street corner. Her backpack hung crooked to one side, the strap lightly twisted. She did not stand pressed close to her father like in the early days, but she did not stand far away either. She looked at Alex for a moment, then at the road ahead, where other children would appear in a few minutes. Her gaze was unhurried, but carried a new sense of weighing things, as if every step now had to be chosen. Pedestrians began to grow more numerous. A man carrying a cup of coffee walked past, the familiar smell drifting by. A woman pulled a small suitcase, its wheels rattling on the sidewalk. A bus stopped at the end of the street, doors opening and closing, people getting on and off efficiently. No one stopped near Alex. No one asked questions. No one mentioned what had happened. The city operated like a machine, without long-term memory. Alex swept to the area in front of the school gate. The sign was already lit, the iron gate still closed. He remembered the first morning, the pale yellow streetlights, the patrol car stopping exactly here. The memory surfaced and then settled, like a scar that had dried, no longer sharp with pain, but still present. He knew Ryan was alive. The information reached him through a brief remark, through a quickly passing news item. Ryan, being alive, brought no sense of victory. It did not make Alex feel that he had accomplished something great. It simply confirmed that one person had gone on, and others had as well, each in their own way. There was no commendation hanging anywhere, no public thank you. No one mentioned Alex's name in a meeting or a report. What happened that day was not wrapped up in an easy story. It dissolved, blended into the flow of days, like a drop of water falling into a river. Alex bent down, pulling trash close to the painted line. The broom handle brushed against his hand, a familiar sensation. He made another pass, though it was not yet needed, then stopped. Lily had moved a few steps ahead. She turned back to look at her father once, the glance brief and complete. There was no question, no reminder, just a look, confirming that she had seen him there. Alex did not call her back. He let her go. His hand tightened lightly around the broom handle, then relaxed. A fear still sat intact inside him, but he knew that keeping her close forever would not make that fear disappear. She needed to learn how to walk on her own, in her own rhythm, even if that rhythm was not necessarily safer. The wind passed through, stirring a few scraps of paper. Alex stepped forward and gathered them. He dumped the trash into the bin, closed the lid, then stood upright. The sunlight was clearer now, making everything look normal to the point of feeling almost false. The city did not change color because of what had happened. It simply continued, steady and cold. Lily walked a few steps farther, then stopped, looking toward the road that led to school. Other children began to appear, their voices blending together. Lily inhaled, adjusted her backpack strap, then moved on. Alex watched, not stepping forward with her. The distance between them was short, but enough for him to feel the change clearly. He thought about everything that had taken place. There was no moment framed as an ending, no reward to put away, no lesson distilled for the many. Some right things were done, and the world did not become better because of it. The world simply continued, as if it had never needed fixing. Alex bent down and set the broom against the ground. The sound of the broom dragged across the sidewalk, steady and dry. He pulled one straight line, then another, gathering the remaining small fragments. Each movement was precise, neither excessive nor lacking. Lily had gone farther, blending into a group of friends, her figure growing smaller among backpacks of many colors. Alex stood there, broom still in hand, eyes following until he could no longer distinguish her from the crowd. He breathed in, then slowly out, bringing his breath back in line with the rhythm of the street. A car passed by, wind brushing his jacket. Alex stayed where he was, did not turn his head. He knew he would return here tomorrow morning, and the mornings after that, with the same street, the same broom, the same sweeping rhythm. There were no promises for what came next, and no sign that things would feel lighter. The broom touched the ground again, drawing a long line along the sidewalk. Alex held that rhythm, eyes lowered, as if keeping this single motion steady would keep everything in place. And the street continued to open out in front of him, quietly, offering no conclusion at all. This story is not about a heroic act, but about the quiet cost of doing the right thing in a world that continues to function as usual. Alex saved a life, but he did not save everything. He could not change how people look at him. He could not preserve his child's complete innocence, and he did not receive any reward or recognition. The lesson here is not be brave, but lies in a harder question. When doing the right thing does not bring a good outcome, would you still do it? Society often praises results and rarely looks directly at the long-term consequences that those who do the right thing have to carry. Sometimes, what is harmed the most is not the body, but the people standing beside it. Alex's story forces us to look again at how we judge others, how we stay silent in the face of injustice, and how we assume that things will work out. That is not always the case. If this story made you pause and think? Please share it so more people can reflect on it. Thank you for following along. We are committed to continuing to bring thoughtful and carefully crafted content. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more meaningful stories.